Okay, hello. Boy, this Gina person sounds really accomplished. So I don't really have a lot of things to say other than thank you for having me. One, I guess I would say, so if you had told me a couple of years ago that I would be changing jobs to run a center at 64, I'd be like, really? But then if you told me I'd be joining a startup at 61, then I'd be like, ah. Which is, I guess, just another way of saying, you know, it's never too late to reinvent yourself, so you should all think about that. Although, if you do want to change your gender, I highly advise doing it before you're 60. So I just wanted to make 2 quick points, and then you can talk. So the first one is about... Sorry? Oh, do. I really hate my voice, but anyway, that's good. So the first one is really about AI, right? And I don't know what you all think about AI, but I'll be blunt, I don't care. But there's a point to this. The world doesn't care. The world does not care what we think about AI because it will come, whatever we think. And I recognize there are ethical issues, there's environmental issues, there's copyright issues, and you know what? People are going to use it anyway. And, you know, we get the, as I fond of paraphrasing Donald Rumsfeld, we get the audience, we go to war with the audience we have, not the audience we would like to have. So we need to understand how AI is going to change the world and change how people come to information, and then we have to get ahead of it. If we want to fulfill our mission, we need to know how they are going to use it, what they would prefer, what the architecture of information is. Because if we don't, and we just sit and say we would like to do what we would like to do, then we are going to be completely left behind. So that's the first thing I would say. It's like AI, we don't have a choice. We really have to kind of deal with it if we want to do what we say we want to do, which is help the world. And then just to add to that, so we are going to wind up reinventing a lot of journalism because AI is one of these massive technologies that will change everything. If we're going to reinvent journalism, let's reinvent it properly. Let's make sure we serve all the people that we never served before. We all understand in this room kind of how news decisions were made in the past and are still being made, for better and for worse. And we've always said, I think, to ourselves that diversity solves a lot of these problems, and certainly it does. Having more people at the table really does help change what our sense of what news is, and I'm happy to talk about that at length. But the truth is, all of us here who have risen in legacy news organizations know what a story is. I spent 16 years at the Wall Street Journal. I know what a Wall Street Journal story is, and I know what it isn't. I spent 11 years at Reuters. I know what a Reuters story is and what it isn't. The fact that I am a Singaporean trans woman helps me move the needle a little bit, but it doesn't change the core idea of what we think or what is acceptable as a story. And the one thing I would just say to all of us as we move into a world where we can have more impact because we're going to be reinventing and building from the studs up, to think about what it is that news truly is and how it can truly serve the communities that we want to serve.
Terrific. Gina, we've got so much. Can you hear us enough?
Yes.
We have so much to say.
We have another mic somewhere, I think.
That one's great.
This is the better one? Okay. We'll just hand it back and forth.
All right.
Or I'll just project. But let's start right in with AI. You published an essay a few days ago that I really commend to everyone. It's on Semaphore. And you raised a lot of questions there about how AI is going to revolutionize how people interact with information. You've touched on it a little bit now. But I have a question about how we move, like, you know, with with this information. Does it not wind up putting us and putting people potentially into even bigger filter bubbles or more filter bubbles? You know.
So there's a lot of pluses. I'm just going to say that the plus point is that news is going to be much more tailored to us, and not necessarily just, I like reading about this and so I'll read more about it, but it'll know what I care about, right? I mean, if there's going to be a story about the school, they'll know your child, which school your child is in. They'll know, what subjects they're interested in, and so you get a story that's more useful to you. And when we think about how often we write a story for the broadest possible audience as opposed to targeted audience, we can do that, and that's, I think, in some ways, great. When I was running the Asian Wall Street Journal and we had an audience in Asia, every now and then a US journal person would come up and they'd write a story that said, Singapore, country the size of Rhode Island. Well, that's not useful, right? Because my readers know how big Singapore is. If they had written Rhode Island, state the size of Singapore, that would have been useful. And so we changed those things, but now we can do it at scale for everyone. That's really worthwhile. But the flip side is, yes, we're all going to get into filter bubbles, and one of the things I think we have to do is think about how do you build a system that those things don't happen. I mean, people worry about misinformation. What I really worry about is targeted persuasion. Because I can write a story that appeals to every one of your biases and never has a single falsehood in it. Right? I just have to sort of carefully not give you context. I just have to carefully not add some facts. And that's immune from fact-checking. Everything in there is true. So how do we build fact-checking and contextual checking for the future? One really quick thing. So on the way up, on the way down, I decided I'd build a bot on the train, so I did.
Wait.
Yeah, read more.
Everybody knows what that means. Explain it.
Well, okay, so if you have a Claude account or an OpenAI account or a Poe account, I have all three, it's $20 a month. You should get them. You should play with this.
Say the names again.
OpenAI, GPT, Claude, which is Anthropic thing, or Poe, which is something from, of all things, the people from Quora, and you can try different models. It's all each $20. I would get Claude. Claude's really good. And so each of them will let you build a bot that works and that is shareable. So I built, in Claude it's called an artifact. So I built an artifact in Claude, and what I'd done the night before, I had just had a discussion with Claude. Okay. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to be able to put a story and say, tell me what are the asserted verifiable facts, right? Donald Trump is 20 years old is an asserted fact, even if it's not true. But so I said, so if I said studies show that men are smarter than women, is that an asserted fact? And they said, yes, it is, because they're studies and theory good. And I said, what about if it said men are smarter than women? He said, well, that's an asserted fact. I said, no, it's not. And so we had this discussion. It made me sort of think, what could I do with this? So what I did on the train was I built a bot that I put a story in, and it will tell me what the central thesis of the story is, because you can extract that. It will tell me what are the asserted facts in the story that buttress that thesis. It will tell me what the assumptions, whether spoken or unspoken, in that story will buttress that. And it will tell me what the central assumption is that you have to sign on to in order to agree with things. And then if you click an extra button, it will tell you alternate framings for the same facts. And it will tell you perspectives not seen in the story and questions not asked. And all of this I built literally in about 3 hours. So there are tools that we have. The biggest thing we face, well, a lot of things we face, one of the biggest things we face in the industry is a lack of imagination. And if you can imagine it, you can build it. And so I think there's real possibility to build tools that will help us try to get out of these bubbles. Sorry, long answer.
No, I think it's fascinating, and I just, is this bot something that we could sign up for? Is it an app? Could you build it as an app that, basically, when I read a news story, I put it in, and then it just kind of goes through those?
So I'm in the middle of fine-tuning it, but it's basically quasi-done. I have not, quote, published it, so it's only for me right now. I can publish it and give it to people, and they can use it as long as they have a Claude account. So this is kind of part of things that I want to do with CUNY. build these things, and then build them as proof of concepts, and ideally get somebody to build them for real, and hand it out. I think of it as a tool that you use pre-publication. If you're a reporter and you just finished your draft, and you figure if you give it the editor, they're going to say like, "You idiot! You didn't call so and so for comment," and like, this guy, there's another explanation for why he's got 5 Rolex watches. And so it's a pre-check thing, but then it's also a news literacy tool, because I could also see us saying, I've read this story, and there's another tool I want to build which will take the same story that's reported, the same event that's reported on like by 5 news organizations, take them all in, and then it would tell you what are the facts they all agree on, which ones have unique facts, which are otherwise known as scoops or mistakes, and then how each one frames the story. And that's a very fast way of looking at a single event, right?
Okay, I'm a skeptic. I'm not a skeptic about AI so much, but I am a skeptic about its maturity to use in a newsroom. And let me give you an example from Reuters. So we're now using AI to generate, we've used AI for a very long time, and maybe you can say a word about the early uses of AI. But we're using it now to generate subheads and headlines, which is very problematic because it extracts information that you wouldn't want a foreground, it's kind of extraneous or secondary, and right now there is a system in place where humans, actual humans, look at those subheads and then write to the reporter and say, AI has generated these subheads, what do you think? And you just go like, okay, but like how mature are these systems? And I know it's been in use for a long time, and there are applicable, applications where it's useful, but, are we there yet, or are we not there?
So I think it depends on how you use it, right? And right, Reuters has done, AI for a long time. I was part of that exercise, and we've done a zillion it's like everything's my fault, I know. Ask my children, they'll tell you. So the way I sort of think about it is this. So how many of you actually know like how a large language model works?
Vaguely.
I'll do my quick version. So first of all, they're called large language models because they are language models, they're not fact models. They have no representation of the world, so they have no idea, right? If you say the moon is made of cheese, it will say the moon is made of cheese, right? It doesn't have an empirical worldview. So what they are is language models. So I think of LMs as a very diligent, enthusiastic English major. I call him Dylan. He has a beret and he uses a cigarette holder. So Dylan went through school and slept through all his classes except for English, French, German, and all of that. And so he's using language, but he's not good at anything else. But he's very helpful. So if you ask Dylan when Benjamin Franklin died, he doesn't know, but he wants to be helpful, so he'll make up an answer. Right? But if you give him a book about American history and say, just read the book and tell me what the book says, he's actually pretty good at that. Then if you ask him when George Washington died, he can give you that answer because he's got the book, and then you ask him, how many years apart did they die? He'll make it up because he slept through math class. So LMs can't add or subtract, but they can read. And they're getting better all the time. I agree with you. I think the systems are not entirely there, but they're getting there at an incredibly fast rate. And there are things you can do, some things you can do that you can let into the wild, meaning they're accurate enough that they will go out and your error rate will be no more than a human error rate. And there's some things that you need a human in the loop on. We have a headline generating tool, but it doesn't actually generate, at Semaphore, it doesn't actually generate headlines. What it does is, there's a headline tool and an SEO headline tool, and what it does is it says, read the story, you should have this person's name in it, because that's a famous person, or you should make sure this title is in, or you should make sure you have this, and so it's a prompt to help you write a better headline. If you want, I can talk to someone at Reuters about rebuilding. So I love that instead. We have a copy editing and a style thing. It's right about 80% of the time. And, we go through another human. No, but we go through another human. I mean, again, it's like, you have 2 copy editors in every story, right? So you have a bot that does some of it.
Now I'm really nervous.
I mean, honestly, you should be.
Are you using this, is Semaphore using this for every story, everything that goes out, goes through it?
So we're in the process of reworking our workflow. So we have right now a bunch of bots, and let's just be really clear. The bots were built by me and this 25-year-old reporter, and with help.
His name is not Dylan.
It's actually JD, unfortunately. He's a nice guy. And with the help of another person, who's in fact an English major, who's our audience guy, but learned to code. But now we're all vibe coding with tools. And so we have, a couple of real tools, a couple of toys, and a couple of interesting experiments. So the real tools are, we have copy editing bot that will proofread and also note style variations from our style, which is AP plus a bit. We have one that will read your story and then search for related stories, so that it's a very quick way of doing a search. And it will search for it in any language you choose. So I've written this story about U.S.-China relations. I'd like to find related stories in Chinese. Okay, it will do that. It will read your story and it will look for places where there's data in the story that you might want. And it will go out and it will find the data, from the APIs that we have, and then it will say, here's unemployment data. Would you like to look at the data? Would you like me to download the data? Would you like me to start building a chart for you? We have a tool that looks at your story and then writes the meanest possible tweet about it. So you can see to just look at. And then we have a couple of other toys that are, that are experimenting. So some of the stuff that I'm going to build at CUNY, I'm just going to put into Semaphore and we'll just see how it goes.
This is probably a good time to ask a question, but before that, I just want to ask how many copy editors are out there? How do you feel about a program that does copy editing work?
If there's a human that overlooks it, sure.
This is Meryl Furman, used to be head of the copy desk at the New York Times. We can talk more about that in the questions.
What was generally, I hate it, but I know it's coming.
As long as a human overlooks it, it's all right. We've talked about AI, and you talked a fair amount now about Semaphore, and I think that's interesting to us here, watching our very rapidly changing media landscape, and soon to be changing more quickly, obviously, through AI as well. What made you want to participate in the launch of a startup when you were, what was it, 61 or something, right? And having had this really, incredible career already. What made you, was it the AI component, the ability to kind of put that in, or why do we need more news organizations? That was not meant to be mean, but
we need tons of news organizations. No, and actually I will riff on that one right after I answer. So I had turned 61. I was executive at Reuters. Nice job, nice gig. I've been there 11 years. And, it's an exciting job. You wake up every day, something is blown up somewhere in the world that you need to think about. And I was in charge of security, too. Believe me, something blows up, literally. But I also thought, look, I'm 61. This is a nice job. Do I want to be a lifer? Do I want to be here for another 10 years? And yeah, it's like I didn't really want to be there for another 10 years. And I sort of figured I was wrong, because I've subsequently gotten jobs at 64. But I said, hey, if I'm here another 2 years, no one's ever going to hire me. So if I want to move, I should move now. And then Ben Smith, I don't know how many of you know Ben, and Justin Smith, I don't know how many of you know Justin, they both have reality distortion fields. And so I went out and I talked to them, and these guys are like, we're going to do this and we're going to do this. And I was like, why not? And I have not regretted it for a second. I have learned so much moving from a large legacy organization. Every place I work, except for Singapore Broadcasting, has been more than 100 years old. And now, I'm employee number 6 at a startup. And everything is different. I still remember we launched, Ben and I went out for a beer because we were both busy, so we went to a really crappy Vietnamese restaurant, had a beer. And he said, like we cleared the mountain. It wasn't clear that on takeoff we would clear the mountain, and we cleared the mountain. And then 3 weeks later he said, well, things are going really well, time to reinvent everything. And I thought, and that's what's happened. It's like we are literally reinventing every day, and those muscles are really important. Well, wait, I just want to say one quick thing. Why do we need more news organizations?
Wait.
Okay.
Just to explain the scale of what Semaphore reached. You now have over, and the numbers may have changed because it moves pretty quickly, over 800,000 newsletter subscriptions and over 3 million monthly readers across those platforms. That's just extraordinary.
Yeah, and we had a story that said we might break even. So there you go. And we have massive events. We now have in our 3rd year the biggest gathering of CEOs in America at our spring conference. We had 200 of the Fortune 500 earlier this year, and we're hoping to get 400 next year. It's bad shit, if I can say that. But why do we need more news organizations? We need more news organizations because people, for all of the great work that legacy news, people were not served. And if you think about all of the, first of all, there are a lot of local newspapers that did serve people, and that's great. But even then, the business model was you had to try and serve a sort of a largish community. And so if you look at people like Wendy Thompson, who founded MLK 50 in Tennessee, that's an audience that never had any that were really ever served, right? And so two really quick questions. How many homicides are there in DC a year? Round numbers.
Less than Donald Trump thinks.
Yeah.
That was off the record.
200 about.
Very good, 190. And last year, 190 last year. And anybody here from the Washington Post? Okay, that's an old friend. So this is not meant as a thing. How many of those murders does the Washington Post cover?
Almost none.
And why? Which ones get covered? You know the answer, right? Yes, you know the answer. We're not going to go into it. And so, 15 years ago, Laura Amico and Chris Amico, 1.5 people, Chris had a day job, created Homicide Watch. They implemented Homicide Watch, which is now dead. And they decided they would cover every murder in DC. And that had an audience because, you imagine, your loved ones die and the newspaper or records, I don't know. And so why do we need more news organizations? Because we have never served communities well. If you were gay in New York in the 1980s when AIDS was ravaging this city, how much do you think the New York Times covered AIDS?
Abe Rosenthal forbade it.
Sorry?
Abe Rosenthal forbade it.
I know, exactly. And then, and believe me, I give it a talk where I pulled out the 1913 New York Times editorial about why women should never get the vote. Because, you wouldn't trust them with the vote. So all I'm saying is, it's fine. Everybody can have their own views about things. We need a multiplicity of views, and we need to serve communities more. So that's why we need more news organizations. Not Semaphore particularly, one way or the other. At least that one's off the record. But having as many voices as possible, I think, is better for society.
So I've got a couple more questions, and I want to make sure that we get some time for audience questions as well. I remember getting the announcement about your transition in my email around the holidays in 2020.
December 18th.
December 18th. I remember opening my emails and thinking, oh, who is this Gina person who's writing to me. I've never heard of Gina Chua. Is she related to Red? And then I read a few sentences further, and I was just so impressed with your courage. And I know I read later that you said you got something like 10 to 20% of your cognitive ability back, and I just was curious, like, what it must have been like for you to make this change at a very large news organization, which, was
Traditional?
traditional, and had its impediments. That's also off the record. Sorry, it's just I've been there. I am a lifer, I guess. I guess I'm just like, or maybe not. Maybe after Theola's lecture earlier, I'll start to give myself permission to do other things. But talk to us a little bit about what it was like for you to come to that decision, and then also to execute it in such a public manner. I mean, there were stories about your transition. It was, not something that you did or could do quietly, given your stature.
Yeah, I mean, well, one, yes, there's no possibility of going stealth on this one, unless I want to move countries. So, you didn't really have a choice. So the large part of it was really a question of, could you do it and could you not be killed? And if you ask me today, I'd give you a different answer from, 2020. The real trick, if any of you are thinking of transitioning, is you should get to a position where you're in charge of the budget at your organization. And strangely enough, after you transition, nobody gives you grief. I have no idea why that is, but it worked out really well. No, look, I mean, there's a long time I thought I'm never going to do this, right? This will be the end of my career, it will be the end of all sorts of things. And I guess luckily for me, one, I'm not that courageous. I was courageous out of transition at 20. But the world kind of moved in my direction until it didn't. And so there was this moment where I thought it could happen. And the truth is, I had spent most of my life living two worlds all the time. And, it's sort of, imagine if you're gay or lesbian and you're not out. And, people say to you when you come to the office, I mean, you don't have to tell anybody, but you come to the office, like, oh, what you do on the weekend? Oh, I went to whatever with a friend, and like, there's just so much. I mean, they don't need to know about you, but you're just sort of always navigating the spaces. And then you're going somewhere, and you want to hold your girlfriend's hand or your boyfriend's hand, just in case you might bump into someone, right? And so you're always thinking these things through, and so your mind is bifurcated in not useful ways. And so literally, this was my 20% of cognitive ability when I didn't have to think about this. I mean, it's not like I'm whole or well, I have a lot of therapists. But I'm a 4 now. But it does help you. I mean, it's opened up completely different thoughts in my head, which I'm still kind of grappling through. I mean, there's a book proposal sitting out somewhere about the nature of gender and when we categorize by gender, why we categorize by gender, what the categories really mean. Are they useful? When are they useful? When are they not useful? So I burned up another 10% going into that direction, but it's kind of a good way.
Well, congratulations. I mean, really, and I wonder though if, seeing what's happening now, and I have a trans niece, and it has been very, it's been a very difficult journey for her, and it's been a very frightening, terrifying time right now. To be living in a country where your rights are not only being questioned, but people are being actively dismissed. She's reading these news stories about people in the military losing their benefits after acquiring them, not to mention the whole issues of bathrooms and all of the many, many things that are happening now. I know that this is a much longer answer than we have time for, but what
what guidance